All right, guys, today I'm kind of excited to get to bring you something a little different. So, I have been reaching out to several companies that I found doing interesting things, offering to interview them because I find that they're doing something interesting that I'd like to cover and show off to you guys. And I'm really excited to show you my very first one. And that is with a company called Civo. Now, if you don't know what Civo is, let me lay the groundwork for you right now. If you're looking for the fastest cloud Kubernetes distribution, Civo is the reigning champ right now. I have tested this across many clouds, and they by far can create the clusters the fastest. Now, they do some other really cool things, and I'm very excited that I get a chance to interview somebody from Civo and bring you guys more information on the service, show you around the service a little bit, and get to hear from Civo themselves. Now, with me today, I have Kai, and Kai has graciously offered me his time to give you guys a little insight into Civo, what they're doing, and what their future plans are.
The Null channel.
I want to start out with this interview with just talking about how simple and fantastic the user interface to your cloud is. When I went in there, there was very straightforward how to do stuff and how to set stuff up and how to even start an initial cluster. There wasn't a plethora of settings. Did you take your inspiration from something or draw inspiration from another service or another application that you used?
We drew inspiration from another service in the sense that pretty much everybody on staff are developers or, ops people and have used various services. And we basically went, what would we want to use? How would we want it to look and feel so that we would be able to just get on with it? And then we've got an in-house designer, James, who is very, very good at just making stuff like just work. So he's a treasure because when a bunch of us, the sort of cloud engineering team or us developers kind of go like, it would be great if it did this, and he can sort of design stuff around that, and thanks very much for the compliment.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that it even went through to your CLI. So if you've ever used AWS's CLI, this isn't ragging on them. They have a lot more services, but it's also very complicated. It's like, okay, I just want to start a cluster. How do I give myself permission to start? Anyways, and Civo was very simple, even at the CLI level. So
I think that's a good example of what we kind of want to do. Like with the CLI, it's the idea with the commands is like, okay, Civo, create cluster, and because that's what you're there to do, or you want to start VM instances. Like the verbs are, well, they're also alias to a bunch of sort of very common aliases. So if you do ls, it's the same as sort of list and various things like that. But the idea being that you wouldn't necessarily have to think too hard. What we want to do is kind of flow like you as a user would.
Talking about users and how a lot of this seems very user-centric, I'd like to bring up another interesting part that I actually really like. And that's the fact of your marketplace is open source. So the marketplace, you're just to cover a little bit about your marketplace. Once you stand up your first cluster, you can actually quite easily either while standing the cluster up or afterwards, you can deploy applications. These are like one-click apps into your Kubernetes cluster. But that marketplace itself is open source. I think that this is, and I'll give you just a second to talk about it, but I think that this is a really interesting use of open source because it gives users direct insight into the things that they're running, how to run things on your Kubernetes clusters. And anyways, I was wondering, is there anything that inspired this? What were you guys thinking when you made the marketplace the way you did?
like the so much of the stuff in the CNCF and the wider sort of cloud native community landscape, like there's so much already open source stuff, and in many ways, a lot of it is, I guess, to some extent, just because there's so much of it, a lot of it might be difficult to discover. And in order to sort of highlight the applicability of various apps to clusters, we wanted to make it easy for people to install. But given that the apps themselves, are open source or have an open source tier, we wanted to make sure that contributing them is easy, updating them is, as easy as can be, and that people can sort of be inspired if they're really inspired by a new project, or even say, somebody is creating a new thing. We want to be able to give them a platform to go, yeah, deploy it here, show it off to other people, make it easy for other people to try your thing or try the thing that you're excited about. And then, of course, the actual, Kubernetes itself is open source. K3s, the distribution that underpins the sort of Civo service, open source. So if
Awesome. Yeah. And so then talking about open source, do you have like a public roadmap for the marketplace or any of your future open source projects?
There's a public roadmap. So Siam, our director of technical evangelism, to get his title right, he has written and he maintains our roadmap. Basically, what we do is we have on our platform, we've got a suggestions area, and any user can submit suggestions. We open those up for voting, and what gets the highest number of votes gets implemented. It really is that simple. So basically the focus being on the developer and on the ease for developers to get stuff running in Kubernetes is the idea that what we want to build is the stuff that works for the most people. And the roadmap is part of that. That can be seen on our blog, civo.com/blog. We have a number of things that we are implementing for KubeCon as part of our sort of general launch. And there's a couple other bits in there, including parts about the marketplace that are coming in the summer of this year. So with the marketplace itself, we are actually revamping that a little bit and making making it more flexible, basically, where it was originally, I think, intended like, let's just add this particular thing to your cluster. What we want to make it do is, give app maintainers and users also a little bit more flexibility about how they deploy it, whether it's, components in a particular type of app or whatever. So there's a couple of changes coming out in that you can also read about on our site.
Absolutely. And I'll have links to your site and a lot of the things that we talk about in the links to this in the description of this video, for sure. And along with that, then you guys have some community office hours.
We meet with our community. First of all, our community is, international. We have, during our beta, we had about 4,000 users from all over the world. So we to do them online was the right thing to do, and we're keeping those going every month. And they've been sort of centered around a theme, but always have a sort of Q&A component. So all of our senior staff are on there. My CTO Andy usually runs those events, and what we do is we kind of have people are able to ask directly from Civo staff any questions that they have, but also we have a really active Slack community where, all of us on the staff hang out, but also the community can point users to, resources or guides or whatever. So it's a sort of, ongoing thing about how we meet with our community and communicate to them, but also communicate with them and get feedback from them.
Okay, so we've talked about your marketplace and some of that. I want to talk a little bit about your open source commitment. How are you guys? So we've talked slightly about your marketplace is open source. We've talked about how the core technologies that you used in your service, K3S is one of those. If people don't know, K3S is a Kubernetes distribution by Rancher, and we're actually going to talk a little bit more about K3S a little bit further on in this, but it is an open source technology developed by Rancher. What is your open source? Is this the last? Is this all the open source we're going to see from you guys, or do you have a? Are you going to be releasing and being more active in the open source community outside of just your marketplace?
So the way that, it might be a little bit cliche, but when you're working with open source, you're standing on the shoulders of giants, and the whole thing is so reliant on people contributing back. And we have, in fact, what we've already done is contributed some patches back to the upstream projects of various of the things that we use. I'm not at liberty to discuss yet exactly what those things are, but there is more to come around the sort of stack. So we have the what we call Civo stack, which is the system that sort of runs the customer Kubernetes service, which runs K3S. There's various parts, like all open source, on there that we utilize and sort of benefit from, and we're definitely going to be, not only contributing back to those, but we are planning on having some, announcements around open sourcing of certainly around the marketplace, and then, around the sort of client side of that. So, plus, of course, our entire API is fully public. We have an open source command line tool. Infrastructure as code stuff like Pulumi provider and Terraform provider, all open source. So, if PRs are accepted, like if anybody wants to do that side, if feedback to us, they're free. But also, we are hard at work on making something sort of, to feed back to the giants that we are standing on.
All right. So then let's talk a little bit about K3S. And I think that is really great when, a lot of the times you'll hear with like the GPL and some of those licenses, really what a lot of people are looking for is for, companies that build their stack on it to contribute back. That's a big deal in the community. So I think it's great when companies really go forward and make a statement to do that. More than just, lip service. So,
yeah.
So there's actually some videos, so I'm going to link those videos, but there's been some talk. So I thought we should just talk at a very quick level about K3S. So you guys based your managed Kubernetes service off of K3S. Why did you I know that the why is a video on itself, but like at the one paragraph level, why did you choose K3S as the backbone of your Kubernetes service?
So one of the big things that we wanted to make sure for our service was that it would be fast, and that it would, sort of allow for the maximum return for a developer, right? And K3S, when we first saw it, it being sort of designed for, to run on less powerful devices and things like that, we were like, we thought this had legs, because that means that A, we could stand up a cluster really quickly, and B, it would, any given VM size for a node would give, hopefully more oomph to the actual user. And the other handy thing about K3S is that it's, fully, it's 100% Kubernetes, right? It's compatible. The only thing that's really different about it is that they've what Rancher did was they put it in a single binary. They set the sort of control plane token joining workers to it. They tried to make that as simple as possible, and then they ripped out some of the sort of vendor specific storage class things, and while they ripped out certain things, they also like defaulted to including a couple of bits and pieces. So it comes bundled in by default with an ingress controller, traffic, right? So the idea for us is, I was thinking about this like in a way like there are those developers who want to build a Kubernetes cluster from like complete scratch, right? Kubernetes the hard way. And if you want to buy a kit to build yourself a race car in your garage, you can do that, right? Most of us just need to get from A to B, right? And to have a service, to have a product that comes in bundled with things that work for most people, but also allow you to rip those things out should you want another ingress controller in there, or should you, for whatever reason, not be collecting metrics, which is the other big thing that we bundle in, the Kubernetes metric server. You can do that, but like for the most use cases, which is what we envision, like we want quick deploys, we want rapid turnaround. You're going to want something in there that allows you to just run with stuff. So,
now,
yeah.
Was this a subtle jab at my Kubernetes the hardest way series that I did?
No. It's less a subtle jab at that specifically, and more about like Kubernetes is really complex, right? So,
that is part of the series, is the fact that it's an 8-part series where we go through and stand up everything individually, absolutely hardest way on VMs. And you're absolutely right. It's hard. At the end of that, you don't even have cluster DNS or some of these things that a lot of people just take for granted because it's kind of, things like kubeadm or, Civo just provide it by default, and it just exists and it just works. And that's not even part of it. And it took an 8 series. So I think it's a very valid point.
And like the other thing of like, obviously Kubernetes has changed over time as well. So not only parts of it have become more complex, but parts of it have effectively been sort of, not going to say solved, but determined. So, you might, any given Kubernetes developer these days will expect cluster DNS to be somehow working in there. They expect the clusters or the nodes to be able to talk to each other. Like it's fundamental, right?
Yeah. And they expect to be able to talk to their services by their service name and things like this. So, all right. So then let's talk about can you tell me the largest challenge about bringing K3S as a service? Now, I think you've alluded to that this might not have actually been a technical challenge that you dealt with, more so than a business challenge.
I don't know if it's a business challenge either, like, because in terms of
perception.
Perception's a great word. Like, people somehow, I think, might be thinking, because, the tagline for K3S is, 5 less than K8s. And my other favorite thing, which is like the positive side, as in cannot be perceived in a bad way, is does not require a degree in clusterology, right? And if you have a degree in clusterology, like, more power to you, and like, you're awesome. But the smaller number for in K3S doesn't mean that it's somehow less performant or less able to do stuff. Like I said earlier, that it's Kubernetes. It's 100% compatible. All it does is it makes some choices. It makes some choices for you, and it sets things up in a very sort of just turnkey start car kind of way.
It's slightly opinionated. I say slightly because for the most part, you can do whatever you want. And there's more opinion, OpenShift is a more opinion distribution than I see something like K3s.
Yeah. One of the things. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go for it.
So one of the things for us was that we wanted to keep things compliant, standards compliant, and things that a developer would expect. So we don't want any nasty surprises. Sure, okay, fine. K3s doesn't have the GCP storage class integrations in there, but that's a kind of, I guess, an assumption that we can make for a developer using Civo, is that they know they're not using GCP, so they're not going to run with those storage classes. But pretty much everything else in terms of the sort of API setup and how you sort of control things, those are straight up Kubernetes as described in the docs standard in K3s. So, and that's, yeah, you're right. It is an opinionated distribution, because the idea is that that Darren from Rancher had was that he wanted something that originally that he was going to use for, I guess, Rio, but the way that it actually works for any given developer is handy, because some of those decisions have been made for you already.
Well, and 2 points that I wanted to point out to help your plight in perception of K3s. First, if you get managed Rancher, so Rancher themselves, which is a very well-known brand, if you get managed Rancher is actually run on top of K3s. So it's not even like other people aren't using it in production in the cloud. The second point of perception here is that it is certified by the CNCF as a Kubernetes compliant distribution, which means that if your application runs on a compliant cluster, it should also run on the K3s, assuming you have the right ingress and things set up.
Yeah, so you might have to do a tiny bit more sort of, but that's the same sort of configuration that you would have taking from one
cloud to another.
Exactly.
If you used a storage class germane to GCP and you moved to Azure, you would need to change your storage classes.
Yeah, in addition to, potentially working with a different ingress setup. Yeah, exactly. So
correct. So there's nothing different. Yeah. Perfect. That's really cool. So let's talk about the benefits that you gleaned from K3s. Now, I was a little bit skeptic. I hear people say a cluster in under a minute. Now, I wasn't able to get it under a minute. I tried it a couple of times. I got it in under 2 minutes, and this was from starting time to I actually ran my first kubectl command hitting a cluster. It was a little under 2 minutes, but roughly 2 minutes. That is, and I'm sure with some automation, because like this was me doing it by hand. This wasn't something pooling to wait till, it was like the exact time. So I'm sure you can get actually much faster, but I was able to do it in under 2 minutes, all manually. That's pretty fantastic. Did you guys have to do a lot of work? Like, was this mostly just inherent to K3s, or was there a lot of other infrastructure as a service that went into standing up something so quickly?
Yeah, so a lot of it is down to K3s being pretty cool, and self-contained and knowing what it does. And in fact, like we had Darren sit down for a really deep dive on the Civo YouTube channel about like all the crazy stuff that it does. But yeah, there's some fairly cool stuff that our people were able to do on the sort of infrastructure side, working. So like we've got this thing that we're calling Civo Stack, which is the sort of platform that runs the platform. And there are some pretty nifty things there that allow us to spin these things up and have them ready for the sort of client processes to allow for that. And I think I'm not breaking any secrets. I know that our CEO has said this recently, like we are looking for a sub 30-second start time.
Now, so one thing that I tried to measure, and this was a little bit difficult because you guys didn't let me stand up a cluster with 100 nodes, is, and this just goes from how I understand Kubernetes. So if you don't know, I have done a little bit of work on deployment systems for Kubernetes. I also have done a little bit of work on the project KubeADM. So I'm kind of aware of this and how these things happen. That being said, I'm just following up to the question of, if I was to make a 100-node cluster, do you still hold to the same 2 minutes, or does that expand?
So it will be your control plane and nodes will be responding in that time. Whether it's all of them is another question, but you will have the Kubernetes API and things running on it to
and
a certain
access
scale.
To your first few worker nodes.
Exactly. Yeah. So and the other ones will join up as they come up and as they sort of get their configurations. But you know, the idea is that we're trying to keep as transparent as possible. Like, you know, if you were to scale a sort of reasonably sized cluster up by a few, you know, sort of more nodes, you should see those nodes joining in hopefully under a minute.
It's all a matter of perspective for a reasonably sized cluster.
Yeah. I mean, it's we haven't for Civo, we haven't yet seen, because we've been in beta for over a year. So, you know, we haven't seen any truly large production size, you know, production type clusters. I know internally we've tested things to you know, 750 nodes and seeing how long that takes up to come up. It's longer than 2 minutes, I'm going to say that, but you know, but the platform lets you do it. Like, you know, conceptually you could do it.
Yeah. No. Okay. No, that's cool. And I wouldn't actually expect anything less, because you don't want to bog down your API server by just making a bunch of or connecting all the worker nodes at the exact same time. That's no tool does it that way, and I wouldn't expect anything else. I just wanted to validate. Okay, so I do a decent amount of machine learning on mine, so I would be remiss if I did not ask this. Probably a lot of thumbs down, because my followers like machine learning. And one of my questions would be, do you have any plans for Kubernetes clusters with GPUs to empower things like Kubeflow or the likes to have GPUs at their ready to power machine learning?
Short answer is absolutely yes. Longer answer is we have some test hardware in place, and we are trying to figure out where to kind of what, because we have a couple of regions and with more on the way, and we're basically thinking where and how to allocate that hardware. But yes, it's GPUs are coming.
Awesome. That's really cool. Because one of the things, especially if you get a very easy deploy of something like Kubeflow, one of the things that I find is absent is something that I could use that doesn't break my bank account to deploy a machine learning pipeline on. I love Kubeflow, but Kubeflow is expensive to run in the cloud. I looked at Linode, which is one of the only other providers that provides GPUs at this point. I know that DigitalOcean has it in. Anyways, this doesn't matter. But it was like $1,000 a month and for the GPU. And I was like, I can buy a GPU a month for that. But I want this in the cloud. I don't want it in my home.
You don't need that extra cooling costs, you know, like.
Yeah. So a cost performant GPU in the cloud is something that I am definitely interested in and am looking out for. So if you guys do end up providing that in the near future, be sure
I'll be sure to hit you up. Yeah, no, I'll hit you up with that. The thing, one of the, you know, speaking of cost performant, we strive to be transparent and easy to understand with our pricing. Like that's one of the Civo things is not only do we want to get you up and running quickly and with a sort of interface that works, for you, it's we don't want a morass of billing complexity. The idea is that we want you to unfortunately things have a cost, but we want you to pay for the things that you use and as you use them. So with our sort of with the stack and with the way that our nodes do come up quickly, the idea is that we want to enable people to spin things up, run it, tear it down, the cattle versus pets analogy, use what you need when you need it, and then go on your merry way with your amazing model that you've refined. We don't want to make it hard or complex to deploy, and we don't want to make it hard or complex or that you need an accountant to read your bill at the end.
So right now you just support a single control plane, correct? Now,
yeah.
Do you have plans in the future to either abstract this, or do you plan on supporting high availability clusters if I needed something like that?
Both. So what we're going to do is we're going to have an abstracted away control plane, and that is imminent. And the other thing is because K3s already has sort of native support for high availability, but with some limitations about the sort of etcd that it supports for that, we are that's also coming. It's just maybe a couple of weeks away.
No, a couple of weeks is nothing. Okay, that's really cool. So we've talked about your Kubernetes cluster. I noticed here in the UI that you have infrastructure as a service as well. And I think that originally you guys started out as trying to provide infrastructure. Is there something that caused you to pivot away from the infrastructure as a service to the Kubernetes as a service? Now, I also say that noticing that your infrastructure as a service is still fully functional. I used it and played around with it. So it's not there. But it doesn't seem like it's as big of a focus for you guys right now.
Like I think what we started out as an infrastructure as a service provider. So there was an OpenStack backend and VMs launching, things like that. I think we kind of started with it might be a bit of a cliche again, but like you build stuff that you're excited about. And we saw that containerizing applications, the cloud native way, so to speak, that's just how things are, right? And being able to then run things effectively in containers in the cloud, well, you need an orchestrator for that, and Kubernetes won that fight. So I think we'd be remiss in not having a way for developers to quickly get up and running with what is now the de facto way of running applications in the cloud. So it's a combination of us being excited about Kubernetes and sort of the developer experience around Kubernetes, and then also knowing that if we're excited about it, build it and they will come,
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's what's happened. You built it and we have come.
Yeah. The other thing is that, because build it and they will come, the community is there. There is a demand for this stuff. But no, Kubernetes is still new for so many people. Well, I mean, it is I'm no exception. Like I haven't been in this field for long. And we wanted to make it so that Kubernetes could be accessible and understandable and approachable without needing, a 3-letter, 4-letter acronym after your name, because, it should be open and it should be around for everybody.
And that's kind of the whole point of open source, is to have it available for everybody. And And one of the reasons I started my YouTube channel is because it is hard and it's a complicated subject. And so while Kubernetes was open source, it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, Kubernetes is cool, but I as a person can't play around with it because it's hard and it's hard to understand and hard to learn. And so I think that this is really cool to give a really easy and fast place where you can learn and have some of the cloud stuff as well.
I appreciate that. That's music to our ears. The other thing that I think is really like, sort of, you spoke about machine learning earlier. It's like machine learning by itself is already difficult enough. Combine machine learning and the cloud, and you're adding complexity on complexity. And what we want to do is, the idea with anything that Civo runs is we want it to be so that you can get going with the things that you want to get going with. So if you're into machine learning and you want to do Kubeflow, you probably aren't, with some exceptions, you probably aren't interested in the intricacies of what goes on at the cluster networking level for a sort of machine learning cluster, right? You want your model to be trained and you want results. And that's kind of the sort of, we want to sit somewhere, I think, in the interface between, give us this thing and we'll run it for you, and go ahead, there's some VMs, go build it yourself. We give you options and you can do anything you want with them, but we kind of like give you a sort of springboard to go from.
Awesome. Now, I missed a question here that I wanted to ask because I noticed you allowed me to run privileged pods, which is good. I think worker nodes should run privileged pods, but in your infrastructure, you don't actually distinguish between a worker node and the control plane node, especially because you allow for a single node to be stood up, which is then your control plane as well as your worker node. But this also means that I can get into any node with full access and do whatever I want. And you didn't give me SSH. So if you use your infrastructure as a service, you actually give me SSH ability into the node that I stand up. But you don't do that. But in effect, I can get there. Is there plans to remove this in the future for when you've abstracted your node out?
Yeah, so the control plane is being abstracted out. As we speak, and we never, like, if you want to set up a Kubernetes cluster on infrastructure as a service on Civo, you're free to do that any way you like on the VMs. If you are using the sort of managed Kubernetes service, that when we were running it in beta, we had the control plane as one of your nodes, visible nodes, because that's the way that K3S sort of does it out the box. And that's why you can run K3S on pretty much any hardware with enough RAM, because the control plane node can also do work. So you could run it as a single thing. So we are that's changing slightly. So we're moving away so that the control plane would be a true control plane, and you'd sort of be scheduling work onto worker nodes. That said, we know that there are users who prefer to do things their own way, and if you want to go off the map and see where the dragons are, you might be able to. But in terms of the managed service, like the only thing that you might be doing is sort of getting your cluster to the point where we might have to say, you might have to rebuild.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's a completely acceptable. I do like finding all the dragons, as you probably are aware. I do like to dig into the finer details of how things work, and generally when I'm doing that, I find dragons.
Yeah, I mean, and like, we're all sort of, we are all motivated by tinkering and trying stuff out, and some people want to try the sort of, can I get through here to get to the other side, and other people just want to try different experiments. But
you're saying some people are more painful than others. You didn't have to look at me when you were saying that.
No, I guess there's some people who are more creatively havoc minded.
Great. Thank you. I guess that might describe me.
No, but this is all good. Like, in terms of people laugh at the whole Donald Rumsfeld unknown unknowns thing, but sometimes you encounter a thing that you go like, we really didn't even think that was a thing, and that's your unknown unknowns that somebody's discovered.
Yeah, good point. All right. So is there anything else that you guys as Civo want to say or tell us? That's pretty much all my questions. I went through the Kubernetes service. It was pretty fantastic, very easy. The Civo command line, very easy to use. Or Civo, sorry. I initially called you guys Civo as an American. I don't know how to pronounce anything that's not dumb American. So
it's all good as long as we're all on the same page with what we're talking about. How do you even pronounce the tool that you run Kubernetes commands with?
I don't cuddle with anybody. So yeah,
CTL
I know
for
exactly.
me.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. Or is it a GIF or a GIF or an enum? Or anyways, the list goes on.
In terms of what we are, at the time of recording, we are the week before KubeCon EU 2021, and so that's next week. We are officially coming out into sort of general availability at that point. Early access starts on the 4th of May. You may be watching this after the 4th of May, which means that you no longer have to apply for access. You just sign up and you get access. And in terms of things that are in the pipeline for users coming up is we have new regions coming up. We're starting with one in North America and one in the UK. And we have, I think, 2 more regions in the pipeline in the short term. And then obviously more in the medium to long term. In terms of features, we have databases as a service coming to be supported, and we are doing a custom object storage solution.
So when you say custom object, are you talking about like a S3 bucket type of solution?
As in sort of storage for ephemeral storage for your not ephemeral nor storage for your nodes, storage for your nodes that you can then sort of move around and use as you see fit.
Okay. And then you're talking about database as a service. Do you know which database that's going to be, or is this just a hypothetical?
No, there's a couple things that are going to be available at launch. From the sort of open source database systems that there are.
Cool.
But they're SQLs basically.
SQL database, right?
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for coming out and discussing your system with me. And
thanks for having me. Like it's been a real pleasure to sort of be able to talk about stuff that we've been sort of busy beavering away with, and it's cool to discuss stuff with people who've tried it and so obviously great that you like it, but it's great that you're also spreading the word.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For the longest of times, the Kubernetes ecosystem has been, other than the larger cloud providers, it's been mostly contracting. With SUSE's acquisition of Rancher and whatnot, it's been slowly dwindling. There was Heptio was bought by VMware. And so for me, it was very exciting to see somebody that was more new to the area to really take on and say, hey, we'll provide, a new Kubernetes distribution. It's been a while. I thought that was cool.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Now, if you guys are interested in getting into and dealing with Civo right now because you're excited, I actually have my referral link down below. And if you do that, I will get some credits on their platform. So if you're interested in checking it out, trying out a very fast, lightweight Kubernetes distribution in the cloud, go ahead, find that link, give it a try, and sign up. All right. So I really want to say a big thank you to Civo, and I hope to bring some more of these interviews to you guys in the future on more Kubernetes, cloud native, and open source topics. I do actually look forward to interviewing some of the engineers in Kubernetes and other things like this, and hopefully give them a chance to share this, spread the word, and get insights on what they're doing. That being said, if you like this video and want to see more videos with interviews with engineers or new products that are coming out, let me know, and like this video and subscribe to this channel to let me know that you'd like to see more of this content. If you're excited and interested in seeing what Civo has to offer, I have a referral link in the description marked as my referral link. I also have a link to their website if you don't want to use the referral link. All right, that's it for me today. As usual, if you did not like this video, please go ahead, hit that subscribe button, stick around, and see if these videos get any better for science.